The rapid, widespread distribution of the New Testament manuscripts in the first 2 centuries precludes any purposeful, centralized corruption. It also gives rise to the need to study the relatively small number of textual variants. The point is, Christians wanted everybody to have the gospel. And so they let their scriptures go everywhere. You didn't have to whip out your I am a professional scribe card. Remember P72, what I saw up in Denver? That guy's handwriting wasn't the best. He made some silly mistakes, but he loved the Word of God and he wanted to possess it. And so yes, there were those kinds of things, but since it went everywhere immediately, no one could ever come along and gather them all up and say, these teach reincarnation, we'll take it out. Or these don't teach the deity of Christ, we'll put it in. Could never have happened. Not possible. Now you see, if you've ever been bugged by those little footnotes that say some manuscripts say this and some manuscripts say that, folks, that is the cost, if you want to call it the cost, of not having the problem that the Muslims have. Because you see, about 20 years after Muhammad's death, according to Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 6, pages 509 and 510, which is one of the authentic hadith collections, and you actually have to mention it's Sahih al-Bukhari if you cite hadith, unlike certain people. But anyways, if you read that, you'll discover that there was a fear amongst some of the Muslims. The fear was that the Quran would become like the Christian scriptures or the Jews, where they'd fight over things. And so they wanted an official version. And so the third caliph, Uthman, gathers the Quran together, and he assigns a group of people, and they create a revision, an official version. And then they burn everything they used to create it. And then they send copies to all the main Islamic centers and say, this is what you must do. Now that produces a nice, stable text. When you've got the power of the sword and the Islamic caliphate behind it, it creates a very stable text over time. But there's one little problem. You don't have to have those little footnotes. I don't have it with me right now. But if I had my Arabic Quran with me, I could open it up and there are no footnotes in it. And Muslims like that. They thought, that makes my text better than your text because you've got those little footnotes. But if you're thinking with me, actually all they've got is what Uthman thought the Quran should say. And they have to have absolute confidence that Uthman got it right. There's a cost to that kind of certainty. And sometimes that kind of certainty isn't the truth. And that's one of the issues that we have to think about. We don't have that issue at all when it comes to the New Testament. This leads to another important point. When scribes copied their text, they were very conservative, often incorporating marginal notes into the text, since they could not be sure if the note was original or not. Makes sense, because you're reading somebody else's handwriting. Sometimes they'd be dead. You couldn't go back and ask them. This means they even preserve mistakes or silly readings. This may sound bad at first, but consider what it really means. The New Testament text is tenacious. That means readings are preserved in the text. All readings, including the original readings, are still a part of the manuscript tradition. That is why the believing textual critic can persevere at even the most difficult variants. One of the readings is the original. What does that mean? Well, there are some very difficult textual variants. I discussed one on my webcast a couple days ago out of, I think it was 1st or 2nd Peter. And it is hard to come up with a decision. It doesn't really have any great weight to it, but it's hard to come up with a decision. But we can have confidence that one of those manuscripts contains the original reading. It's tenacious. It hasn't disappeared. It's like, Rob Bowman put it this way, and I think it's a very good way of putting it. It's like having a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and you have 1,010 pieces. It would be bad if how many of you have ever done a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, and you get to the end and you're missing one piece? Isn't that a bummer? You know, the cat ate it, the dog ate it, something like that. You never know. Buried it in the backyard. It just ruins everything. But what if you had a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and you have 1,010 pieces? It's the identification of the added material that is important. We haven't lost the original readings. They're still there. Now,